Oh, right, we're supposed to, thank you for recording. So the first thing on the agenda is, we have to call the roll. That would be just
I think
who's here.
Yeah, I think you can see who's here.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I needed to do that.
Bill's not here yet. We'll stay there.
Okay, and then I, as you can tell, I'm having a very hard time managing being the chair of this committee. So I would like to reorganize. Is anybody up for chairing the committee?
It has Pedro written all over it.
Great.
Why is that? You're the senior. You're one of the senior members with most experience here.
You're so proactive.
How about Bill?
I know last time I got nominated because I was late, so maybe we should nominate Bill.
No, I would prefer Pedro.
Okay, Pedro. So I'll make a motion to nominate Pedro as the chair of this
I'm more than happy
committee.
to second that.
I'm not just report what kinds of chocolates those are. Okay, Mom? I'm not gonna eat them.
What do you do? Sorry, what are you up to?
I want to
You want to see what kind of chocolate Dad got? Okay.
that orange.
All right. I'm sending Bill the link. Hopefully he'll be joining us momentarily.
I think we should zoom in every Monday for your second breakfast. It's fun. Of course, I only have a dog, so.
Chocolate and omelets. It's a thing.
Chocolate.
And so I did not have our other guests join us today. So I think, we need to vote to make that official, I believe, right?
Yes.
So Jonathan, Pedro,
Abstain.
okay, and I. So it is official. Pedro is our new.
It's unanimous, as things said.
Pedro's our new chair.
Two cans.
Wow.
Sucker.
It's like the Republican Judiciary Committee here. Just railroad through.
We're in a hurry. Got to get it in before the election. Okay. The meeting minutes. I believe you sent those a few weeks ago. Jonathan, have you had a chance to look at them? Did you have any?
I had no comments.
Okay, I didn't either.
Hi.
So we'll approve those minutes. Great. And then we
Okay,
should.
you want me to run the meeting since I'm the chair?
Yeah, I would love for you to run the meeting since you're the
Okay.
chair. I think that's a great idea.
There's a motion
So
to-
do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for our last meeting on July 27th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote. Jonathan?
Aye.
Kate?
aye.
Pedro? Aye. It's unanimous. Okay, so Kate, you said that John Hull will not be joining us?
No, John and Eric will not be joining us because I thought that we would want to focus on preparing for Thursday night.
Is that John
Okay.
Senior? Who's John Hall?
No, the third.
And so what was
We had, the last time we got together, we talked about co-living and we all had questions about it. And he does a lot of housing projects and has built some co-living spaces. And I thought that he would be good to answer some of the questions that we had about that.
I don't know what co-living is. Is that co-housing?
Yeah, the co-housing, like the small units with shared living spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe for the next time?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is to prepare for our joint meeting that's coming Thursday. So I get, we've got two things, I guess, really to focus on. One is the housing study that was issued last week, and the other would be the really two zoning proposals that we've got in the works right now. One of them is to change the B3 to make it more developable friendly for, particularly for smaller lots in the B3. The other is an incentive package, creating a new overlay district along the downtown, or really in-town corridor along Route 7 to incentivize affordable housing construction in general, to help create some incentives for daycare facilities, and to incentivize some senior housing. So those are the things we got on the table
So far.
so far, yeah. Well, for our meeting, is there anything else that we should include
I mean,
for our joint meeting on Thursday?
in the B3, we took out the affordable housing incentive with the intention of creating a separate section for affordable housing that would apply to all of the zoning, and we haven't done that yet. So when we're talking about the B3, know that that's hopefully coming.
Perhaps we should chat a little bit about that, John, because when I look at it and when I start thinking about it, it seems it's really complicated, really, to have a section that's really devoted, dedicated to affordable housing, particularly because of the way that it would be applied throughout town, right? Initially, you think we create a section of affordable housing to incentivize it, for the community, but where exactly would it go? Like, are we incentivizing, multifamily construction in the R1A and the R1B, or do we want to do it? I mean, my preference would be, obviously, with my proposal, is to start incentivizing these types of bigger constructions along the main route in town, where it's most dense and most commercially viable. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that certainly makes sense for new construction. On the other hand, I don't think we want to drop the ball on potentially, if there were some vehicle or assisting with financing or tax incentives or something with creating ADUs or that sort of thing, which could be created anywhere. And so it doesn't have to be high density affordable housing. I think there are other vehicles that would also benefit the town.
Sure, the incremental housing. I mean, the incremental way of doing it obviously is preferable. The taxing policy, financial incentive policy, I don't know that really falls in the purview of zoning. So perhaps maybe we should focus this conversation on those two things. I've already issued a proposal for a tax incentive to you guys. Do you guys remember it? Remember looking at it? I could resend it to you.
We're looking at it.
If you would maybe resend that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from a financial point of view, do you have any thoughts, or, from financial assistance, do you have any thoughts on that, John?
Well, I think one of the deterrents to people creating ADUs, for instance, is that banks don't want to lend on them. I mean, Adams Community Bank may do it, but I'm not sure any of the other local banks do. And so that means that you basically have to take out a mortgage on your home, a home equity loan. And not everyone's got that kind of home equity to put $100,000 into an ADU.
Yeah.
So I don't know that the town's got that kind of incentive either, but and maybe there could be something with, a tax abatement similar to a TIF. That's a possibility. Also, sewer hookups is something that we could certainly talk about. So I think I think there are a lot of things that the planning board's thinking about that the select board obviously has to be involved in. And so that's a good thing to talk about in a joint meeting, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to send this tax incentive thing to you guys. Chris, you want a copy of it too?
Sure. Jonathan, do you know why banks won't lend to an ADU?
It's just kind of, I don't know whether it's FHA or what, but it's, in general, it seems to be out of their ballpark. I don't know specifically why. And maybe they'll come around to it. I just don't know. And I've heard all that secondhand. I've not had a communication with the bank.
I think it's safe to say the other issue is people don't want to be landlords.
Well, neither the select board nor the planning board has any jurisdiction over what people want that way, but sure.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so if we talk about this tax incentive, we come across an issue that I think we would have with any one of these programs is how these programs will be monitored. Right, like how will they be, who will be the administrator of these programs? Because the tax exempt, let's say you have a tax exemption on a property that's being used for affordable housing, whether it's let's say there's an ADU on somebody's property, and they're using that or they're renting it out affordably, and we propose a exemption on units that are rented to an affordable tenant or somebody who needs affordable housing. How will we monitor that? How is that going to be, what's the bureaucracy behind that? Who's going to make sure that the rent is within the parameters that we set, and who's going to keep track of this stuff? I mean, this is always a problem with all of these programs. We don't really have that kind of infrastructure in town.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Well,
just could.
You know what Provincetown does?
I do not, but this thing is based on the Provincetown one. And this is not exactly what I wanted to send you guys.
The Community Preservation Act has an exemption for moderate income seniors and low income households. That involves a yearly submittal to the assessor's office of your of your tax statements.
Or a lease, a signed lease.
So I think it's not a new thing to ask the assessor to collect that information. And obviously they have to compare it at that time to the area median income to make sure that that household can legally take the CPA exemption. I assume this would be a similar process. So you'd figure out the delta or the difference of what the real estate value would be with the ADU rented at market. And then just subtract that off. Is that the idea?
I think so.
I mean, I don't know. Would that be how it would run? I mean, the idea is that we have, I think as a group here, we all agree that the threshold should be at 100% AMI for somebody, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody is renting a property, okay, so you're saying what would the average rent be, or what would that mean? Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking aloud here. So how would we figure out what the market rate of a rent would be? I mean, the housing study will give us some guidance to that, but.
Well, I think, or you would abate the value of the ADU. You need an appraisal for that ADU.
But wouldn't the program run efficiently if we just decided what the AMI was for somebody making 100%, figure out what 30% of that is, and make that the rent, the monthly housing expense, and force the homeowner to rent the apartment or the ADU at that price in order to qualify for the tax exemption.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think Chris's point, there's a difference between what they're paying, what the tenant is paying for affordable rent and what could be market rate. How do you figure out what actual market rate is? Where do you,
That's why I'm saying you just take the market rate out of there and you use, census data or state data to figure out what the income is, what the median income is in town, and you base the rent on that, on 30% of that AMI.
okay.
And the affordable housing needs doesn't really have any data on rentals, which is impossible to have because no one advertises rentals because they're all word of mouth. They don't go
Right.
through, they don't go through real estate in a heartbeat.
If we're collecting tax data from the renter and tax data from the owner, could we, if the rent that they're charging is equal to 1/3 of the income of the renter, can we do it that way?
We're not collecting data from the renter.
Why wouldn't we be collecting data from the renter to make sure that they're below a certain
Oh, if
AMI?
yeah, if it's qualified for an affordable housing program, but in terms of the overall market, you're not going to get that information.
Oh, Kate, I think you're right. Why don't I follow up with Provincetown? I think the combination of what Pedro and Kate are saying is probably the way to do it.
So then the next question is, I'm assuming that a parcel is not assessed by the improvements on the parcel, but but all the improvements that are on the parcel are taken up as once, not separated. So in other words, if a parcel has an ADU on it and a house on it and a garage on it, all three things I'm assuming are not taken into consideration separately when figuring out a tax assessment for it. So if that's the case, I guess that's my first question. Is that the case?
I think they can be paid. I think sometimes they can. They're certainly measured separately. So if your property has, a bunch of outbuildings, they would all be measured and listed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're all given a value, but they certainly could be.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, let's say you have a two-family that's all within one structure. That structure is likely going to be assessed in one fell swoop. So how do we assess what the tax abatement would be?
I don't know.
Seems like a question for the assessor or communities that are already doing a program like this.
Yeah.
All right, so Chris will follow up with Provincetown, see how they deal with this, and we'll go from there.
Would it be that hard to assess each unit separately?
I don't know. I don't think it would be. But my sense is that it probably likely isn't now.
Right.
So let's say
But still, if
that
you have
whole
a 3-bedroom
reassessment
and
would-
1-bedroom, you can pretty much divide that up through some formula.
I think the danger is that you could vastly increase the value, the assessed value of a property
Really?
by doing that.
it's likely because you have fresh eyes on it. Let's say the property hasn't been assessed in decades.
Mm-hmm.
They reassess that every 3 years.
Right. Supposedly.
Well, no, in reality.
In reality, okay.
Mine was just reassessed.
Yeah.
How did we find out if it's reassessed?
My tax bill came and my assessment value was much higher than it used to be.
Oh, in your tax bill, okay. Yeah, I haven't
But
noticed that on my tax
you can
bill.
look it up. Those numbers are released. It's a, public record.
Right, I know, I've seen that notebook in in the town clerk's office
They're all available online.
and online?
You can get a tax property record card, they're called.
Okay, so we have the tax abatement. What else do we have? From a financial point of view, John, you mentioned a couple of things: tax abatement, financial
I don't know if
assistance.
there's any other vehicle for funding. I mean, tax abatement's great once you've built something, but it doesn't help you actually get it built.
Right. So the fund, it just seems like we're set up with the trust to have a funding mechanism. Obviously, the issue of the trust is funding the trust.
Well, but if the trust is taking CPA funding, they basically have to own the property that they're investing in. It's not like
Right.
That's right. We can't just hand it out.
as long as they're taking CPC funding.
That's right.
So what you're alluding to, I guess, is a separate funding stream from our budget.
It's possible.
Mhm.
Well, why can't, if the trust wants to do this, and if the CPA agrees, why can't the trust give grants to create affordable ADUs and just deed restrict the property for the ADU? You can do that.
Could do that.
I don't know how popular it would be, but you could do it. You'd have to have a good marketing program, and
Mhm.
yeah, it'd take some thought, but
It would also have to be a significant amount of money somehow. $2,000 is not going to do anything.
right.
Yeah, well, but still, let's say you're able to get $300,000 from CPA every year. You're likely not going to see more than 2 applications a year, I think.
Mhm.
That's the way these things work incrementally. So you'll have some funds there that would be significant towards the creation of something.
Right.
And if
but
the
how-
marketing is not just affordable housing, but if it's geared for starter home housing or something like that, that's it within the affordable conversation and is deeded. If you talk about senior housing, some people wouldn't mind building a little separate space for their parents. And if we, obviously it'll be deed restricted, but I guess what I'm saying is that if the marketing is not just the terms affordable housing, but if they're kind of spread out into all these other areas of housing necessity, that would fall within affordability. Am I making sense?
Yeah. What happens when somebody has an affordable ADU on their property that's deed restricted and they sell the property? Does that have to remain deed restricted? I mean,
Yes.
It seems like it would, but
Yeah, I don't think that's a viable option to do a deed restriction because it affects the whole property.
yeah.
And any bank holding a mortgage is not going to be open to that. And it's
Yeah.
probably significant legal hoops to that.
Chris, do you know if it's possible to deed restrict it for a period of time, say 5 years?
Yeah, you can certainly do that.
And then after 5 years, it could either stay restricted or that deed restriction can change if the property changes hands?
Yeah, I think let's say it was a CPA grant, the CPA funds are involved, you could deed restrict it, let's say for 10 years. And you could say if the property, or you could have a declining sort of deferred payment loan or grant, so that if it's sold within the first year, you pay back 100% of it. And then it declines, and over 10 years, you can sell it and there's no payback. So
And
that
the trust would be funded.
trust would be funded, and I think that would put the deferred loan in a secondary position. Maybe a bank would be okay with that. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that.
Mhm.
Well, again, deed restriction applies to the whole property,
Right.
and so that's going to be the issue.
Yeah, you'd have to write it pretty specifically.
Well, one thing we could do is do what they did in Nantucket, which is if you're going to, let's say you have a property, but your property would not qualify for subdivision, either because you don't have enough lot area or you don't have frontage or whatever the case may be, but you want to create an affordable unit on your property, you could subdivide just the part that the affordable piece is on, as long as it's deed restricted, as long as it remains affordable. That's how the program works in Nantucket, where they've been able to create 2 to 3 units a year for the last 12 years.
Yeah, yeah, and so that would be a carve out in the zoning bylaw so that you can legally allow a lot with no frontage or less frontage. So you'd create the authority there, and then you'd have a kind of a subdivision mechanism to do that.
So this could be our first item for the affordable housing section of the bylaw. That makes sense to be in there.
Yeah.
What do you think, John?
Well, I think anything's possible. It's going to take a lot of research, though.
So you're essentially giving permission to cut up a town lot if you put an affordable unit on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Leads to infill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you could sell that separately.
Yeah, and it can be in separate. I don't know if it could be in separate ownership. That's a good question. I don't know if they do it that way.
Well, then the family and the ADU could build some equity a little bit.
Didn't we just pass that at town meeting, that an ADU can be owned separately?
Whoa.
We did.
We
What's
did.
that, Mom? One in the back.
So there we go.
Separate. Jonathan doesn't seem so enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, well, you're creating smaller lots than the zoning generally requires. And they become permanent.
Yeah, that I think I'd like to look at the separate ownership part of that, because that you're right, it could, but still, it obviously will create a more dense environment in neighborhoods that are limited to density.
You know what you could do is have the owner of the main house own all the property, but the ADU could be owned by the person living in it. Kind of the Forest Row model, only
Yeah.
on a very tiny
Yeah.
scale.
That's right.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You could use,
What's the term? What's the name for that again?
well, it's a condominium essentially.
A housing.
Yeah.
No, it's got,
It's community land trust.
yeah, land trust. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So as far as funding vehicles, is there any other ideas you guys have? And I would say,
I would just, it'd probably be a good idea to reach out to some of the local banks and find out what
Yeah.
their rules are and how we can walk them through that.
Bill, since you have some contacts with the banks, you mind doing that?
I could do that.
Okay, good, thank you. What I was thinking, what I was
Yeah,
going to
write it
say
down.
was that all of these things that we're talking about in terms of housing, I mean, I always think that the best thing is not just to limit it to affordable housing, but how can we incentivize just the creation of housing in general? because there, I mean, you know, I haven't looked at completely at the housing assessment we just received, but inventory is just notoriously low in this town, and it has been across the board. So,
Well, I think obviously the cost of land is a huge hurdle.
yeah,
Building costs are huge. I think you can address building costs through similar programs to, like, first of all, vocational training. And I know for years, Yale School of Architecture have built affordable units throughout the country, based basically on volunteer student labor and stuff like that. And so I think there's a community there that would do it, but someone's got to organize it. And you know, and building supply companies, and you know, they donate materials or give cost breaks to Habitat. So there's no reason that Habitat has to be the only one in the county doing this.
but it all starts with the land, does
Yeah.
it not?
Yeah.
And so even if we had that in place, there's still the land issue. So what I'm thinking is that
Well, there
is always, if we allow people to already do more with the land they have, I think we get the best of both worlds in a way, because we get the infill that I think we want, and we get it in the places where we want it, which is places that are already built up. And we eliminate that cost to people who are interested in expanding their homes or creating separate units. Now, if there could be a program that we can tap into where we can use that volunteer labor that you're talking about, Jonathan, I think it'd be great. If you'd like to look into that for us, that'd be fantastic. Figure out.
I don't have any contacts in the school system.
So maybe we can talk with Steve about it at our joint meeting.
Yeah.
Can
But
ask him
also,
about that.
I mean, the Affordable Housing Trust is about to give away a huge opportunity on 7¼ acres, and by limiting the development. Hasn't happened yet, but
Well, how would such a program work, though? And how would somebody qualify for such a program, or would there even need to be a qualification for it? Are we talking about something that the town organizes and offers it to everybody?
well, I think it's a good place to start is the school system, because we really have basically phased out vocational training to a large
No,
extent.
I get that, but let's say we have a group of 10 carpenters that are associated with the high schools who are willing to go in, and one or two foremen who are willing to participate in this kind of program. How then is the program implemented? Again, is it a program where the town connects people with these laborers? And how would somebody qualify for that type of labor assistance? Would it be offered to anybody? Would it be offered to people just creating affordable units, or people creating a certain size unit? Or, I mean, how would that work?
I would think that has to be affordable units. Because who's going to volunteer for something that's not affordable?
I mean, I would think that it wouldn't matter, because the guys volunteering, they're just looking for the experience, right? So it doesn't matter if you build an affordable unit or a market rate unit, whatever it is you build, 2,000 square feet or 600 square feet. I mean, they're just looking for that experience, right? That's why they're there. Potentially they can be getting credit for doing such work.
Do you think
And
that
again,
it would work in my mind, it wouldn't work any differently than Habitat or Construct or even getting a building company. You know, they may bid on jobs or somebody contacts them to build. I actually, my best friend from college, her husband ran a company that worked with inner city kids and kids that were in juvenile detention and gave them trade skills, and they built houses. And I know he doesn't work from them anymore, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's an international organization. So I will get that information to Jonathan, and we can also, even though that doesn't exist here, it might give us some clues as to even how the school could, you know, to pass it along to the school.
This is sounding like a task force.
You're the chair.
All right, so Kate, you'll get some information, and maybe you and
Yeah.
John can talk about it, and then at our next
Yeah,
meeting,
I
maybe we
can send it to all of us. I just can't remember the name of it because he works for something different now.
All right. So I think this tax abatement policy potential could be something interesting to speak about at our meeting. Questions about it, or the tax abatement would be one thing, and then the idea of creating it all kind of folds in the idea of having or creating or a separate unit on your lot that we can parcel out of a lot that's non-conforming, just so that the parcel itself can be deed restricted. We could have that discussion as well. And when we discuss it, we can mention the land trust model as a form of ownership, or as a form of organization for that kind of project, or that kind of situation. So we've got the housing study. Why don't we move on here, since we're going a little long, to the housing study. Bill, have you had an opportunity to look at it?
Yes, I haven't gone through it entirely, but gone through it.
Do you have any comments about anything you see in there that seems interesting?
None of it was great news. Nothing really stands out.
Yeah, so John and I briefly talked about it last week, and we've got some questions about some things. I think, John, you've been through it a little bit more since then.
A little bit. It's a page turn.
It is, isn't it? I mean, lots of charts, and hey, it's what we wanted. We can't complain about it. I'm happy that we have it. So now we've got this document here that we can look at and hopefully be able to make some good decisions based on it.
Do you think, one thing I wasn't really satisfied with, and I wasn't expecting great things here, was trying to address short-term rentals.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
I don't know how you do that without actually hiring a data mining company to do it.
Chris, how much can we glean from the information in here on seasonal rentals?
I don't know. I mean, the point of seasonal rentals is that they're not available year round.
Is there any relationship though between the seasonal rental and the short-term rental?
I don't know. Not necessarily. I don't know. I have to think about that.
I was kind of thinking about some of the data in here regarding seasonal rentals being almost analogous in a way, or at least, let's say 50-50 or whatever, 50-30 to the short-term rental, because essentially that's what you're getting is a short-term rental. A lot of people will rent out their houses or units for the winter time and then rent it out when the seasons change, when the warmer seasons come, rent it out on a shorter term basis. Obviously, the issue is that we don't know how many people are doing that.
Yeah, if I remember though, the seasonal rental definition was that it is only occupied seasonally. I can't recall the exact definition.
So that might take into consideration snowbirds and
Yeah,
people like that. So again, you know, the one thing I take from it is that our housing stock is old. And so incentivizing, or at least putting the idea that construction is a viable thing to do here in town, and the town offering programs or at least policy that will allow people to build anything, whether it's affordable or not, I think is a good thing. You know, I mean, you ask any planner or any urbanist or whatever, they'll tell you that when you do build housing, it does kind of trickle down. I hate to use that term, but it does trickle down.
you know, it's all about getting the market turning over, right? So if you have seasonal units that are only used when people are here in the summer, that unit is not doing anything else in the market. If you have, if you don't have enough units, that's the same problem. If you have seniors who don't want to move out of their old big houses into, or they don't have a product to move into, an assisted living or a smaller co-housing arrangement, then those big houses, you know, on the hill are not becoming available in the marketplace. So there's all kinds of restrictions on the inventory. The inventory just doesn't move very quickly. So there's a lot of problems. It's not a normal market, if you will. People just aren't moving as they do in other places for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they don't have the cash to move. Sometimes they have a lot of cash embodied in their house, but there's just not a place to move to.
So Chris, one of the things that jumped out at me on page 29, it talks about the subsidized rental housing stock as we have 306 subsidized rentals out of 954 rentals. Does that make any sense to you? Where would we hide 306 subsidized rentals?
Is that the housing authority?
It would include the housing authority. It would include
Construct.
It would include Construct. It would include all of the little group homes that are funded like through HHS. I'll take a look at it, but it's probably straight from the housing, the subsidized housing inventory that counts to our 10%.
It's from their American Community Survey table.
No, it's from the SHI. DHCD SHI.
Yeah, that 306 number.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were at 32%, we wouldn't be subject to a 40B, right?
That's 32% of rentals,
It's different.
not total housing units. I'll send you the SHI list. It actually does list them.
So Chris, is there anything else from this survey that maybe you've noticed that's of interest?
I think I tried to drive that summary, which is in the implementation recommendations. This is page 51.
I haven't gotten there yet.
It's the best part, man.
I'm glad you pointed me the right direction.
So it's the implementation section. It includes a brief summary of some of the more interesting findings. We have grand plans to do some anecdotal interviews of employers. I haven't heard back from any employers yet, but guess they all have other things on their mind. So yeah, check out section 10 for a little bit of a summary of the findings. 0% vacancy rate in for rent housing. That's pretty crazy.
Mhm.
I'm amazed that the housing stock is so old and yet still so highly valued. It's just incredible. When I think of an old house, I think of a house that is, maybe it's been significantly upgraded, but odds are that it's needs a lot of work and that it's extremely expensive to maintain and heat in the winter, especially if it's in Houstonic on oil. And yet these houses are still so valued. That speaks to the inventory, I think.
Yeah. Or lack thereof.
Yeah, lack thereof, specifically.
I mean, when I look at the MLS every day, and they indicate, what things have gone under contract and how long they've been on the market, and probably more than half the things going under contract have been on the market, less than 10 days. And in the past we've had things on the market for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
And I'd venture to say that the things that go under contract quickly are priced less than 500,000.
It's all over the map.
Now, John, this is a recent thing, last 6 months.
This is COVID driven. Yeah, absolutely.
Generally, I think it's true here and it's true everywhere that reasonably priced, reasonably sized housing goes quickly.
Sure.
And the bigger stuff sits and waits, as does land, sits and waits.
So is there anything that is inhibiting the creation of more housing that you guys can think of?
Zoning.
But what at this point, John? I mean, we have attacked.
I know.
I mean, there is none. I think what might be left to do from a zoning point of view is to just create more by right uses.
Yeah,
Less.
that's what we hear from developers, is that by right uses would be a lot better. So
Yeah.
one thing Pedro has drafted this housing incentive zoning district, which the select board hasn't seen yet, but planning board has started to talk about creating an overlay zone where if a developer is building within a certain area and agrees to include 10% or 20% of the units as affordable units, then they would get a density bonus. Like they could build on more land, or they could build an extra story or two. So that added space would offset the cost of providing those affordable units to the town. So it's something that the planning board's talked a little bit about. The thought is in order to really make that happen, that would have to be by right. So similar to what the 40R Smart Growth Zoning District did for the Monument Mills, Rising Mill, and South Main Street. And this is what the CDC came under to permit their development at the Colburn School dorm at 910 South Main, there across from right by the VFW. That was a by right development. The planning board, so long as the developer came in and met certain thresholds, certain amount are affordable, it was designed and met certain design requirements, et cetera, the planning board had to issue the permit. And I forget about the appeal period, but it's really, really narrow window. So it gives the developer the confidence that the town wants it and it won't be appealed, and that they can actually build it. It takes the risk away. So I'm thinking that this overlay zone, this incentive zone, should operate as a series of by right uses, where it's not a special permit. It's not a 6 months of meetings and then an appeal period. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are always about it. Even if we eliminate the special permit, we always have site plan review for everything, which is appealable. And I'm reticent, obviously, to get rid of it because I think it's very useful. From my experience on the board, it's a very useful process. But it just creates that one little still smidgen of inhibition there for somebody who's interested in doing a big project like that to go in and do it, because they could still be appealed, right? And by the time they come to the planning board, they're maybe 15% through the entire project, which could be a big expense for them. So
right.
That's my only thought. It's like it's a catch-22 for me. I'd love to just not have any review at all and just let Ed May issue the permits and make it a safe building. But I recognize the importance of site plan review. John?
Well, I guess Tom Doyle's project had an appeal of site plan review. I'm unaware of anything else. I didn't even realize that you could appeal site plan review. But apparently you can. Is that true, Chris?
That is true.
I'd guess you could appeal anything that the government does if you wanted to. So, and there's probably no limit. The public body makes a decision that affects the public. I'm pretty sure it could be appealable. I agree with you though, Chris. I mean, we've talked about it before that I think we need more by right uses for things like this, things that are this important. And for the select board members, what I'm proposing is not that to encroach or encroach on any neighborhoods or on anybody's really sort of, small little neighborhood community, whatever. It's a proposal to do this type of development on the major axis of town. I want to do it in South Main Street as well as the north part of town, Stockbridge Road. So it would be along Route 7 and those properties that are touching Route 7. So it wouldn't go into the R1A properties that are, over there by Marketplace and that neighborhood where Malcolm Fick lives. And then in South Main, I know that, the planning board has got some reservations about it because we've already got the MXD there. And we've gotten a lot of pushback from some neighbors in that area. But I don't think that since the proposal is only on properties that are along Route 7, I'm not sure that we would get the same kind of pushback that we get from people who for projects that are being proposed on Mahawi Street or on Manville Street. I think it's a whole different ballgame. There's already large projects along Route 7, big houses that have been cut up into smaller units, multifamily units, and that sort of thing. So anyway.
The Mahawi Street project was on Route 7, so.
Right, well, true.
Bill and Kate, what do you think the select board's appetite for supporting medium to large scale by right development on Stockbridge Road?
I don't think there'd be any objection. I'd be in favor of it.
In the proposal, just so you know, I sent it to you guys, but I'm not sure if you reviewed it, but just so we can air it out, the proposal is to create affordable units, to create or incentives for affordable units, incentives for childcare facilities, incentives for senior housing, and as I wrote it, I didn't realize when I wrote it, but as I reviewed it, I realized that what I was proposing was just the ability to build more if there's more housing, that a developer can come and propose a project and say, listen, your zoning is too restrictive for me to be able to pencil in a project. If you give me 3 more units, or if you give me 5 more units, then I can make this really nice, infill project. And then there would be obviously review by the planning board for that, for that proposal.
Sure. I mean, anything would include some amount of housing, right? It's not,
Yeah, it's all about housing. It's all about housing creation.
Yeah.
It went from being like an affordable, it went from being a proposal policy to create an affordable housing section in the bylaw to becoming a community needs policy, basically. It covers those 3 big things. All right, well, we can discuss that at the meeting. Let's see what else Kate put on this agenda. Citizen speak. Before we go there, is there anything else that we want to include for our meeting, for our joint meeting?
I think that's good. I think that's good. So I forgot all about this, which is why I didn't come on time, but I'm assuming that Pedro gets made chair.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
You're lucky you weren't, since you weren't here.
I know, I figured I might be, but thank you.
If you were on the planning board or on design advisory committee, you would have been. John's lucky he's not the chair of the design advisory now, because he wasn't there when we reorganized. All right, citizen speak. Chris, we got anybody?
Nobody. I
Okay.
don't know why.
Wiley, you got anything to say?
Hi, Wiley.
Best citizen speak ever.
Yeah, hi.
Ooh.
Okay, so before this this sickness hit everybody, were we meeting regularly? I forgot. Is it like once a month or something like that?
None of us remember.
I think we were meeting once a month.
Yeah.
So it looks like we can meet the weekend before the holidays or the weekend after the holidays. So there's a Monday the 16th and there's a Monday the 30th.
I think I could do either one.
Let's see. The 15th?
16th.
Oh, sorry, 16th. Right.
Yeah, that-
John, you have a preference?
At the moment, I can do either one.
I could do either, I think.
All right, let's make it the 16th. So then we can, over Thanksgiving, talk to our families about housing.
You're gonna do what, 9:30?
Yeah, we'll do 9:30.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
So Chris, you'll join us too. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, great.
All right.
Bye.
Without objection, I will adjourn here at, what time is it? 10:54.